At Christmas dinner, my daughter-in-law raised her glass and said out loud, "I guess it's time someone starts thinking about moving out." So I cut their mortgage. She said it with a smile, of course. That sweet, polite, polished smile she wore like lipstick, shiny enough to make it seem like she wasn't being cruel. But I knew better. I've lived long enough to recognize the tone people use when they want to hurt you without seeming rude. Everyone at the table laughed a little. That kind of awkward laugh people give when they don't want to get involved. My son David didn't say a word. He kept eating his roasted potatoes like he hadn't just heard his wife suggest his own mother was overstaying her welcome. Hold on a moment before we move forward. Let us know where in the world you're watching from. And if you're loving these stories, don't forget to hit subscribe. Tomorrow's episode is going to be absolutely mind-blowing. I smiled too. Not because I found it funny, but because I had already made up my mind weeks ago. I got up slowly, pretending I had to check on the dessert in the kitchen, and no one stopped me. Of course not. I was invisible in that house unless someone needed something. The kitchen was silent, away from the Christmas music and clinking glasses. I stood there, staring at the untouched pecan pie I had spent the morning baking, and felt something shift inside me. Not pain, not humiliation, something colder, more final. I had lived in that house with them for 4 years. After my husband passed, I sold our home and used most of the proceeds to help David and Madison buy that bigger property. For the grandkids, they had said. We'll all be together, and you won't be alone. It sounded good, safe, reasonable. I had just retired, and the idea of living with family made me feel like I still mattered. So I agreed. I transferred $85,000 from the sale of my house to their down payment and began sending monthly transfers to cover part of the mortgage. Never once did I miss a payment, but over time, the guest room started to feel more like a box. The family dinners became quiet. I wasn't included in the planning, only the cleanup. Madison started labeling the fridge shelves, my name in black marker on one tiny corner, like I was a teenager in a college dorm. One day I found all my toiletries packed into a basket outside the bathroom door. "Just trying to keep things organized," she said with a wink. I said nothing. I kept telling myself not to make a scene, not to be the burden they clearly thought I was. But that Christmas toast? That changed everything. After dinner, I helped wash the dishes while Madison scrolled on her phone. David put the kids to bed. Not once did anyone mention what she had said. The silence around it told me more than any apology ever could. That night, back in my room, I opened my laptop and logged into the bank account I used to manage their mortgage contributions. I clicked Cancel Auto Payment. The screen asked me, "Are you sure?" I clicked yes. The next morning, I made pancakes for the grandkids. I laughed with them, helped them find the batteries for their new toys, and smiled as if nothing had happened. Because I had learned the power of silence. Silence is what they gave me. Now it was mine to return. A week passed before anything was said. I was in the backyard, trimming the rosemary bush, when David came out holding a letter from the bank. "Hey, Mom," he said. "Did your payment bounce? We got a notice." I wiped my hands and looked up at him. "No, it didn't bounce. I canceled it." He blinked. "Why?" I shrugged. "I thought it was time someone else started thinking about paying the mortgage." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't get angry. I simply said it with the same calm tone Madison had used at dinner. David didn't say much, just stood there for a while, confused, then went back inside. 2 days later, Madison cornered me in the kitchen. "We need to talk," she said. "Go ahead," I replied, drying the dishes. "I know you're upset about Christmas. That was a joke. You're being extremely petty, and frankly, it's childish to mess with the mortgage over a misunderstanding." I turned to face her. "A joke? Madison, I've lived here for 4 years. I helped buy this house. I pay 1/3 of the mortgage every month. And you stood in front of the whole family and basically told me to pack up. That wasn't a joke. That was a message. She folded her arms. I didn't mean it like that. Then maybe you should think before you speak. And if you're so concerned about paying the mortgage, I suggest you talk to your husband. It's his house, isn't it? Her face flushed, but she didn't argue. She just left the kitchen and slammed the door to the laundry room. I finished drying the plates and put them away, one by one. That night, I looked over my finances. I had enough left from my husband's life insurance to live comfortably, on my own. I didn't need to stay in that house. I stayed because of my grandchildren. Because I thought being part of their lives meant accepting the small slights, the passive-aggressive remarks, the tiny humiliations. But I was wrong. I was not living. I was enduring. The next morning, while they were both at work, I met with a realtor, quietly, calmly. I asked her to help me find a small place, somewhere close but mine. No shared kitchens, no labeled shelves, no walking on eggshells. She found me a one-bedroom cottage 3 blocks from the park. 2 weeks later, I put in an offer. When the mortgage notice went unpaid again, David came to me, this time angry. You can't just walk away from this, Mom. You committed to help us. We relied on that. I looked him in the eye. I committed to help you start, not to pay your bills forever. You're a grown man, David. You can handle a mortgage. He looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't. Deep down, he knew the truth. That weekend, while they were out shopping, I packed my things, quietly, no drama. I left a letter on the kitchen counter for my grandkids, telling them I loved them, and they could visit me anytime. I left another for David. I moved out that Sunday. I didn't look back. But I know they noticed when the next bank letter arrived. And this time, it wasn't addressed to me. I didn't sleep much that night after Christmas dinner. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Madison's voice again, bright and sweet, saying those words. I guess it's time someone starts thinking about moving out. And then the short laugh that followed, as if she hadn't just tried to throw me out in front of my grandchildren. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of every sacrifice I had made for this family press down on my chest. That room wasn't just a guest room. It was the only space in the house that was mine. My clothes were there, my photos, my medication. I didn't have a key to the front door. I didn't even have my name on the mailbox. But I had paid into that house since day one. And that room was where I folded my laundry, watched the grandkids when they were sick, and sat on the edge of the bed when I didn't feel wanted in my own home. When I woke up early the next morning, the house was quiet. David was still asleep, and Madison had taken the kids to her mother's for the weekend, as she always did after Christmas. I got dressed, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table with a yellow notepad and a pen. I started listing out the dates and amounts I had paid into the mortgage. I still had the emails from the bank and screenshots from the transfers. Every payment, from the very first $25,000 I gave them for the down payment to the monthly $900 I had been sending directly into their joint account, was documented. That wasn't a donation. That wasn't rent. That was me helping to build something I thought I'd be part of. But over time, things changed. At the beginning, Madison acted grateful. She cooked dinner most nights and always made sure I had a seat at the table. I helped with the kids every day, woke them up for school, packed lunches, made sure there was milk in the fridge. I was doing the things any grandmother would do. But little by little, she began making comments. At first, they were small. "Oh, I'll just move this. Your stuff kind of clutters the hallway." Or, "You don't need to wash the kids' laundry. I like doing it my way." I didn't argue. I wanted to keep the peace. But then she started calling it the guest room. Not your room. Not even Grandma's room. Just the guest room. And I noticed she would walk in without knocking, like it wasn't a private space. One time I came back from the doctor's and found all my framed pictures moved off the nightstand. In their place was a candle and a little basket with folded towels. "I had a friend over from work," she explained. "I needed the room to look tidy." I kept my mouth shut. But that night, I lay awake in my bed, my photos in a drawer, my name nowhere in that house, and I realized something. They never meant for me to feel like I belonged. They just wanted my help, my money, my availability. Later that week, I decided to stop being passive. I asked David to sit down with me on a Friday evening. The kids were watching TV upstairs, and Madison was out shopping. I had my notepad with me, the one I had filled that morning. I laid it on the table and opened it. "David," I said, "I need to talk about something." He looked tired. "What is it?" "I want to review the agreement we made when I moved in. About the house. About the money I've been putting into it." He rubbed his face and sighed. "Mom, come on. Why are we digging this up now?" "Because Madison made it clear during Christmas dinner that I'm not welcome here long term," I said firmly. "And if that's how she feels, then we need to make arrangements. But before that, I want to make sure everything I've contributed is acknowledged." He sat up straighter. "Look, I know she was out of line with that comment." "It wasn't just one comment," I interrupted. "It's been a pattern for over a year now, and I've let it slide because I didn't want to create tension. But I'm not just staying in a guest room. I helped pay for this house. I helped raise your kids, and I've been covering a third of the mortgage since we signed the papers." He was quiet, so I continued. "Do you remember when you and Madison were house hunting and you couldn't get approved for the full loan amount without a bigger down payment?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah, and who gave you that down payment?" "You did. And who's been transferring $900 a month into your account since then?" "You have." I closed the notebook and looked at him. "Then, don't tell me I'm being unreasonable for expecting to be treated like more than a guest. Me." "Not saying that," he said, rubbing his forehead. "It's just, this is complicated." "It doesn't have to be," I said. "I just want clarity. If Madison wants me out, I'll leave. But before that happens, I want my name on the house, or I want my investment returned, one or the other." He looked like I had slapped him. "You're seriously asking for ownership?" "I'm seriously asking for what's fair," I replied. "If I'm going to be treated like a tenant, then I want tenant rights. If I'm just a guest, then I want my money back. But I won't be the one who pays for everything and gets pushed out the door the moment it's convenient." David didn't respond. He just got up and said he needed some time to think. That night, I wrote down every detail I could remember. The date of the house purchase, the documents I signed, the bank records, the conversations we had when I sold my house and handed over the check. I wasn't trying to build a case. I just wanted to be prepared. I had learned the hard way that when people stop seeing your value, you have to be ready to remind them. Madison came home later and didn't say a word to me. She walked past me like I wasn't there. I knew David had told her. The next day, she left a folder on the kitchen table. It had a printout from the mortgage lender and a highlighted section showing her and David's names on the title. There was a post-it on the front that said, "This is our house, just so we're clear." I smiled to myself. That was fine, because if they wanted to make it legal, I could make it legal too. I opened my laptop and started looking up real estate attorneys. The folder sat on the kitchen table for 2 days before I touched it. Madison didn't say anything, but she made sure I saw it every time I walked into the room. The post-it note was still there. "This is our house, just so we're clear." I didn't say a word. I didn't tear it up or throw it away. I just moved it to the side when I had to set the table for breakfast, then moved it back after I wiped down the counters. I knew what she was doing. She wanted me to feel small, like I had overstayed, like I was no longer useful. On Monday morning, I went to the small legal aid office downtown. It was one of those beige buildings that doesn't look like much from the outside. I waited 30 minutes before a young attorney named Bethany called my name. She didn't look old enough to be out of law school, but she was polite, attentive, and listened carefully while I explained everything. I told her how I had sold my home after my husband passed and moved in with my son David and his wife Madison. How I had contributed a large portion to the down payment of their house. How I'd been sending monthly payments toward the mortgage. For 4 years. I showed her the documents, the emails, the bank records, and even the original group email between David, Madison, and myself discussing how our combined effort would make the house possible. She nodded slowly as she took notes. "So, just to clarify," she said, "your name isn't on the title or mortgage at all?" "No," I answered. I trusted them. I didn't think I needed to be on paper. Bethany didn't look surprised. "That's common in family arrangements. It doesn't mean you don't have a case, especially if we can prove your contribution and the mutual understanding that you'd live there permanently." I told her about Christmas, about Madison's toast, about the changes in attitude over the past year. Bethany leaned forward. "Are you planning to stay in the house?" "No," I said plainly. "I'm done trying to be part of something that doesn't want me. I just want what's mine." She nodded. "Then we'll start with a demand letter. We'll outline your contributions, request fair compensation, and if they don't respond, we can escalate." I left the office with a copy of the letter and a strange sense of relief. It was the first time in years I had taken steps to stand up for myself, instead of just enduring whatever came my way. When I got home that afternoon, Madison was in the kitchen, unloading groceries. I walked past her to put my purse away. "Yui, we're out a long time," she said without turning around. "I had an appointment," I answered. "With who?" I didn't respond. She turned to face me. "You know, this drama you're stirring up? It's not going to end the way you think." I looked her in the eye. "You said it was your house. I'm just making sure we agree on what that means." She scoffed and went back to the pantry. That night, David came into my room after the kids were asleep. He closed the door behind him. "Mom," he said, "Madison told me you went to a lawyer." I did. He sat down at the foot of the bed, looking tired. "Why are you doing this?" "I'm not doing anything that hasn't already been done to me," I said. "You two made it clear I'm no longer part of this household in the way we agreed. I'm just protecting what's left of my part in it." He rubbed his eyes. "We never said you weren't welcome." "No, you didn't say it, but she did, and you let it stand." There was a long silence. Then he said, "We just wanted to have our space back." I nodded. "And I want mine." The demand letter was sent 2 days later. I emailed it to David directly, then handed him a printed copy. He didn't take it from my hand. He just stared at it for a few seconds, then set it on the kitchen counter and walked away. The atmosphere in the house changed after that. It had already been tense, but now it was worse. Cold. Functional. Nobody talked unless it was necessary. The kids didn't notice much, thankfully. I still walked them to the school bus, still packed their snacks, still helped with homework when asked, but David and Madison treated me like a stranger, which, honestly, made things simpler. The next week, I came home to find all of my food removed from the fridge. Not thrown out, just placed in a cooler bag on the floor of my room. I asked Madison what happened. She shrugged. "We need more space. Figured you'd want your own things anyway." It wasn't about space. It was about separation, about making sure I knew where I stood. She started locking the laundry room. One day, I found the hallway bathroom door locked as well, even though it had always been left open. I asked David about it, and he said, "We're just trying to have some boundaries." I started keeping a small cooler in my room, bought a portable electric kettle so I could make tea, folded my clothes in my room, even though I still had to. Wait for them to unlock the laundry area. The message was clear. I was no longer part of their home. I was just in it. Bethany followed up a few days later. David hadn't responded to the letter. She said we could begin a formal claim if I wanted. I told her yes. I didn't want to go to court, but I wasn't going to beg to be treated fairly, either. Madison must have seen the envelope from the law office because the next morning she stopped me in the hallway. "You're really going to sue your own son?" she asked. "I'm going to ask for what's mine," I said calmly. She laughed. "You'll never see a dime. There's no paper trail that makes you an owner." I looked at her. "I've been paying your mortgage for 4 years. That's the paper trail." She didn't respond. That weekend, I stayed at a friend's house, just one night. When I returned, my room had been rearranged, nothing damaged, nothing thrown out, but my bed had been moved, the drawers emptied, my clothes were neatly folded on the bed, as if someone was preparing for me to leave. I didn't say a word. I just picked up my phone and called Bethany again. I'm ready for the next step, I told her. The following Monday morning, I sat at the small desk in my bedroom, with my bank app open on my laptop. I had scrolled past that recurring transfer dozens of times, $900 on the 15th of every month, like clockwork. I clicked edit, then cancel, and when the confirmation screen popped up, I didn't hesitate. I didn't tell David. I didn't tell Madison. I didn't owe them an announcement. They had made it clear I wasn't part of the family unit anymore. They had stopped speaking to me except for basic questions about the kids. At dinner, they talked around me. At breakfast, they ate separately. It was like I had become a roommate they didn't like but couldn't evict. But what they hadn't counted on was that I wasn't powerless. I had spent years letting them dictate the terms because I wanted peace. But peace doesn't exist in silence that's forced. And I was tired of pretending. 3 days after I canceled the mortgage payment, David knocked on my door. It was around 6:30 p.m. I was folding laundry. He stepped in holding his phone. "Mom, the mortgage didn't go through." "I know," I said without looking up. He frowned. "Why not?" "I stopped paying." There was a long pause. "You could have said something." "I did," I said. "I've been saying something for months. You just didn't want to hear it." He rubbed his forehead. "Look, I know things haven't been great lately, but just dropping the payment like that puts us in a really bad position." I placed the folded towel on the pile next to me. "David, do you remember what Madison said on Christmas? In front of your kids? In front of me?" He shifted uncomfortably. "She didn't mean it like that. Maybe she did. Maybe she didn't. Doesn't matter. What matters is that you let it slide. And since then, I've been treated like a stranger in a house I helped pay for." He sat down at the edge of the bed. "So that's it? You're just done?" "Yes," I said. "I paid my share. I helped you buy this place. And instead of being treated with respect, I've been frozen out of my own life." He didn't argue. He just sat there, looking at the floor. Later that night, I heard him and Madison arguing behind their bedroom door. Her voice was louder than his. I didn't catch every word, but I heard enough. "She's not going to push us around. This is our house. We'll figure it out without her." I closed my door and put in earplugs. The next morning, a new lock had been installed on the pantry. The key, apparently, wasn't meant for me. There was no explanation, just a locked door and my own groceries missing from the shelf. So I made a decision. I went to see Bethany again that afternoon and told her I was ready to file a formal claim. I wanted legal recognition of my financial contribution to the property. She told me it would be a process, letters, documents, possibly even mediation. I agreed to everything. I signed the forms, paid the fees, and left the office with a copy of the initial filing in my purse. 2 days later, Madison called a family meeting at the dinner table. I hadn't been invited to one of those in over a year. David looked exhausted. Madison looked smug. She started. "So we received the paperwork." I nodded. "Good. You really think you're going to get something out of this?" she asked. "I already did," I replied. "I stopped being used." David tried to step in. "Can we just talk about this before dragging it through the court system?" I looked at him. "You had plenty of time to talk. You chose silence." Madison rolled her eyes. "We thought we were doing you a favor letting you live here. Nobody forced you to pay anything." "No," I said, "but you benefited. And now that I'm asking for fairness, you're acting like victims." Madison leaned forward. "You're never getting ownership of this house. That's fine," I said. "I'll take back what I put into it." After that, things got worse. I was excluded from everything. David stopped speaking to me entirely. Madison began leaving. Passive-aggressive notes around the house. One on the washing machine. "Please don't leave your things in here for hours." Another on the bathroom mirror. Shared space means shared responsibility. Every note was a reminder that I wasn't welcome. I bought a mini fridge and a folding table for my bedroom. I stopped eating in the kitchen. I used the bathroom. late at night when I wouldn't run into them. I didn't want confrontation, I just wanted out. But before I left, I was going to make sure they didn't erase what I had contributed. 1 week later, David received the formal notice from Bethany's office requesting mediation. The letter was firm, detailed, and backed with all the documentation, bank transfers, email threads, even a signed thank you card Madison had written me in 2019, thanking me for helping us make this house a reality. I overheard Madison yelling in the garage. I didn't know who she was on the phone with, but her words were clear. She's going to ruin us if this goes to court. That night, David knocked on my door again. Mom, can we talk? I didn't move. About what? I don't want to fight with you. I'm not fighting, David. I'm collecting what's mine. He hesitated. How much do you want? I opened the drawer, pulled out a sheet I had prepared with Bethany's help, and handed it to him. It included every payment I had made since the beginning, adjusted for interest and contribution percentage. $73,800 total. David read it, then looked up at me. We don't have this kind of money. You had it when I was paying. He didn't say anything else. He walked away holding the paper, and for the first time in months, I felt no guilt. I went to bed early that night. I heard whispers in the hallway, more arguing, a slammed door, but I didn't get up. I had spent years giving everything I had to this family. They had made it clear that I wasn't family unless I kept giving. Now, I was done. The morning after I handed David the breakdown of my contributions, the tension in the house turned sharp. No one said a word over breakfast. Madison passed behind. Me without looking at me. David drank his coffee with both hands, staring out the window like it would solve something. The kids noticed something was off, but they didn't ask. I still packed their lunch and helped them zip up their coats before the school bus came. I wasn't going to let this mess affect them more than it already had. That afternoon, Bethany called to let me know that David had finally responded through a lawyer, not a counteroffer, just a notice that they had received the documentation and were reviewing options. Bethany said it was a stall tactic. I knew it too. They were trying to delay the process, hoping I'd back down, but I wasn't going to. 2 days later, I found my bathroom access restricted again. The hallway bathroom I had used for years was suddenly locked. I waited until David got home and asked calmly, "Why is the bathroom locked?" He didn't look at me when he answered. Madison said it's too crowded in the mornings. She wants to keep it private now. I get up at 6 a.m., I replied. I'm out of there before anyone else is awake. He shrugged. It's just easier this way. That was the pattern. Every time I stood up for myself, they found a new way to remind me that I wasn't welcome. And every time they did, they pushed me closer to leaving. That night, I sent an email to Bethany and told her I was ready to move out. We'd continue the legal process, but I no longer had any interest in staying in that house. I asked her for recommendations on temporary rentals or short-term housing. She replied with a list of local options by the next morning. I spent the day making calls. One apartment complex had a small unit available for seniors, month-to-month lease, no credit check required. I scheduled a viewing and left the house quietly while David and Madison were at work. The apartment wasn't fancy. 1 bedroom, a small kitchen, and a narrow balcony. But it was clean, private, quiet. I signed the lease. When I got home that evening, I started packing. Not everything, just the essentials. Clothes, medicine, my bank documents, the keepsakes I wanted to keep close. I put my folded things in boxes and suitcases and stacked them in the corner of my room. I didn't try to hide it. If they were going to treat me like a guest, then I'd give them what they wanted. By Thursday, I was ready. I had arranged a mover for Saturday morning. 1 truck, 2 men. I didn't tell David or Madison until Friday night after dinner. We were all sitting in silence at the table, the kids halfway through their food. I'm moving out tomorrow, I said flatly. David looked up immediately. What? I found a place. I signed the lease. The movers will be here at 9. Madison put her fork down slowly. So you're just walking away? After everything you started? I ignored her tone. I'm not walking away. I'm choosing to live somewhere I'm treated like a person. David leaned forward. You're serious? Yes. And the claim? Still moving forward, I said. Me moving out doesn't erase what I contributed. Madison crossed her arms. You're going to take the kids home from them because you feel slighted? I didn't take anything, I said, but I won't let you take advantage of me anymore. The kids didn't understand what we were talking about, but they could tell something was wrong. I cleared the table and didn't speak again for the rest of the evening. Saturday came fast. The movers were early. 2 polite young men knocked on the front door, and I showed them straight to my room. David came downstairs in sweatpants and stood in the hallway watching as they carried out box after box. You're really doing this, he said quietly. I zipped my last suitcase and nodded. Yes, David, I am. He looked like he wanted to say more, but Madison called from the upstairs landing. Let her go. It's what she wants. I didn't look at her. I just picked up my coat and walked out the door. The new apartment felt small, but it was mine. I set up my things methodically, one box at a time. I stocked the fridge, made the bed, and plugged in the TV. That night, I sat down in silence, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for someone to knock or criticize or lock something up. I could breathe. Monday morning, Bethany called with news. David's lawyer had submitted a proposal. They were willing to settle. No admission of liability, but they offered $48,000 to resolve the dispute. It was less than what I'd calculated, but it was a start. Bethany asked what I wanted to do. I told her to reject it. They want a bargain. I'm not giving them one. 2 days later, a new offer arrived, $60,000. Bethany recommended we counter with $70,000 and agree to mediation. I gave the green light. Meanwhile, David called. I let it go to voicemail. His message was short. Mom, we're trying here. Can you call me back? I didn't. That Friday, a letter arrived at my apartment. No return address. Inside was a handwritten note from Madison. You got what you wanted. I hope it was worth ruining your relationship with your son and grandkids. I folded the note and tossed it in the trash. They had treated me like a burden for years. But now that I was gone, they realized what they had lost. I was the one who kept the bills paid, the kids taken care of, the house stable. I was the one who made things work quietly in the background. And now they were struggling to keep up. Let them. The mediation was scheduled for a Tuesday morning, 2 weeks after the last settlement offer. It took place in a neutral office space downtown. A plain room with a conference table, 2 chairs on each side, and a woman in her 60s sitting between us to guide the process. Bethany sat beside me. David came alone. Madison didn't show up. I hadn't seen my son face to face since the day I moved out. He looked tired, less put together than usual. His shirt was wrinkled, his beard untrimmed. When he sat down across from me, he didn't say anything, just nodded. The mediator opened the session by reviewing the purpose. A financial dispute regarding verbal agreements and contributions toward the property at 1225 Hawthorne Lane. Bethany presented a printed packet outlining my contributions. The $25,000 down payment, 4 years of monthly payments totaling over $43,000, and the additional receipts, repairs, school supplies, groceries, utilities, that added context to how I'd been supporting their household. David didn't dispute the facts. He couldn't. They were all documented. He simply asked that the final number be lowered due to financial hardship. Bethany remained calm and firm. She's already agreed to reduce her original demand. This is the middle ground. The mediator looked at me. Are you comfortable with $70,000, Ms. Monroe? I nodded once. Yes. David stared down at the table. We'll accept. No apology, no explanation, just agreement. That was fine by me. I hadn't come for an apology. I came to close the door properly. The papers were signed. A payment schedule was established, monthly transfers over the next 16 months, enforceable by court order if they failed to comply. It wasn't ideal, but it was legally binding. As we stood to leave, David walked beside me to the elevator. "Mom," he said, "I didn't want it to come to this." "You could have stopped it before it started," I replied. He looked at me and hesitated. "The kids miss you." "I miss them too," I said. "You know where I am. They're always welcome." He nodded again and stepped away. I didn't look back. The next few months passed quietly. The payments started arriving on time. I checked them off each month, moved the money into a savings account, and left it alone. I didn't spend it, not yet. I had lived frugally for so long that the habit stuck. One Saturday afternoon in early spring, I heard a knock on my apartment door. I opened it to find Lily and Ethan, my 2 grandchildren, standing with their backpacks on. Behind them, David stood at a distance, his hands in his jacket pockets. "Hi, Grandma," Lily said. "Dad said we could spend the weekend if it's okay." It caught me off guard, but I stepped aside and let them in. David didn't come inside. He just said, "I'll pick them up Sunday night." I nodded. The kids ran to the living room, pulling out their drawing pads and favorite snacks I had always kept in the cabinet. It was like nothing had changed. They didn't ask about the house or the silence between their parents and me. They just hugged me tight and asked if we could bake cookies later. That night, while they were asleep on the pull-out couch, I sat in the kitchen and stared at the quiet apartment, the small kitchen table, the framed photo of my late husband on the shelf, the note stuck to the fridge reminding me to take my blood pressure meds. It was nothing fancy, but it was mine. There were no locks on shared doors, no labels on food, no passive-aggressive notes, no one asking me to disappear. I didn't have to fight for space here. I already had it. A few weeks later, the family home went up for sale. I saw the listing online. Same address, same front porch, same white siding I had helped paint that first year. But now it was staged and empty. The ad said, "Fresh start, family ready." I didn't feel sadness or satisfaction, just clarity. They were starting over, and so was I. Bethany sent me a final report confirming the payments had been received for 5 consecutive months. She told me I could enforce the remainder legally if they defaulted, but she didn't expect that to happen. The legal process had made an impression. They weren't going to test me again. On the 1-year anniversary of my move, I baked a pecan pie, the same one I had made on that last Christmas I spent in their house. But this time, I ate a slice with my grandkids at my own table. No interruptions, no tension, no second-guessing my place. David still dropped them off once or twice a month. He stayed in the car. Sometimes we waved, sometimes we didn't. Madison never came by. That was for the best. I never moved back in, never asked to, never would. What I built now was quiet, small, and enough. I didn't need to be in someone else's home to feel useful. I didn't need to pay my way into respect. I just needed space to remember who I was when no one was asking me to disappear. And that space? Finally had it.